It's hard for me to write this because it has only been a year since it stopped. It started in 2014 and it happened in my home country of Sweden, when I went to an art school for a summer course as a form of daily activity. The people at this art school were some of the worst people I have ever met, and that included me, because I was kind of trash back then too. I was 21 years old and had little experience of the real world. I had gone 2 extra years of school because of switching majors, and taking an extra year of my second choice, so I was literally on my first year of independence. I also have a light form of autism, and I didn't receive schooling until I was 12, which made me a bit more slowly developed mentally during high school. I'm all caught up now. Basically, I was a 21-year-old with very little experience in life. The people that I met at the art school were not, let's say, the highest of achievers. They were some of the meanest and most terrible people I've ever met. They treated each other and me awfully, as well as the teachers. But I was quite the little turd too. In fact, I feel like being around those people also made me worse. What started the stalking was an incident involving acrylic paint. It was going to be thrown away, so some of us took some of the paint so it wouldn't go to waste, and I finally took the remaining paint. Well, It's Over showed up. Her name was Anna, and this is how she introduced herself. My art teacher was pushing these big tables on a trolley through the narrow passageway of the art hall, and Anna, dressed in expensive designer clothing, stood in her way. So, my art teacher, not fearing anything, screams, "Move it!" Anna snaps towards her with this crazy look in her eyes and shouts, "Excuse me, do you know who I am? I'm a famous woman." My art teacher, not impressed, responds with, "Well, okay, famous woman, move it." And that's how we learned of Anna, the famous artist. She then proceeded to have all the terrible people in my class schmooze over her and treat her like a celebrity. But her real reason for being there was because of her paint. And so the great hunt began. I was roped into it, and my initial plan was to just give her back her paint so she could be off. Except, during the hunt I got these terrifying red flags. She kept sniffing the paint of other people's to see if any were hers. Apparently, she had poured some kind of oil into her paint so she could sniff her way to where they were. During the hunt, she admitted that she had been put into treatment for the criminally insane, because she had stalked a previous schoolmate that she thought had stolen paint from her. She even showed a CCTV video of her old schoolmate pulling a suitcase behind her, saying that's where she had the paint that she stole. I asked her how she got the video, and she said that her dad had connections with the local government, which had gotten the video from one of the local government's cameras, which is illegal for a layman to get access to. During this time, she even showed me the court document which she had saved as a PDF on her phone. During this time, she also admitted to have been sending messages to a famous artist in Orebro because a voice from heaven told her to do it, and that he was destined to help her with her career. Anna also thought that staring wide-eyed made her more attractive, like the kind of stare where you can't see any of the eyelids at all. So, while she was saying all of this, she had this crazy-eyed look on her face. I was terrified of her and couldn't figure out a way of handing back the paint, so she ended up threatening to have the principal fired if she couldn't search every room for the paint. And when she didn't find all of her paint, she put it in one of these school's rooms and said that she would pick it up when she wanted to. She said that she would come back every year during the art exhibit to check if her paint was still there, and that she would sue the school if she found it missing. What a crazy person. End of story, right? How I wish. About 2 years later, I enrolled in a 1-year basic art program at the school. I had completely forgotten about this crazy person. At one point, we were cleaning out the art rooms and her paint was brought up again, and how it would be thrown away again. Me not remembering that crazy famous artist took a nice crimson bottle for myself while others took some of the not ruined color. Opened acrylics go bad after a while, for themselves. And then, as we all tried to continue on with our lives, the crazy lady one day returned and started sniffing all the color. I didn't recognize her at all, and I had forgotten how dangerously deranged she was. I had even forgotten that I had gotten the crimson color from her paint, so when she started interrogating me for why the paint smelled like hers, I didn't know what to say. She also smelled her paint at some other girl's table, and was harassing her as well. Thinking that this was all more fuss than it was worth, I threw away the crimson paint. It had started to cut from age anyway. And that is when everything went to hell, and crazy-eyed Anna became my stalker. When she found out that I had thrown away the paint, she became convinced that I had re-enrolled at the art school specifically to steal her paint. She started convincing a bunch of gullible and, to be honest, low-achieving people that this was true, and I started being harassed. It started with a physical attack. I was painting alone in the evening, minding my own business, when this huge brute ran into me, tackled me to the floor, and hit and kicked me. While this was happening, crazy-eyed Anna was fake crying in the corner, but I could see on the floor how she went from fake crying into gleefully smiling as I was being kicked and hit. Another girl that she had recruited picked up and smashed my phone, breaking it. As the guy stormed off and the second girl followed, I stumbled onto my feet and asked Anna why she had done this, and the answer she gave me made me realize what kind of person she was. "So you will know that I can hurt you if I want." That's what she gave me. I later asked the brute why he had attacked me, and he said that he hated people who stole. And this guy is training now to become an art teacher. I fear for those children. I had bruised my ribs, but were not allowed to go to the hospital because the principal didn't want to get involved. And since my phone was broken, I couldn't call for an ambulance, so it took so long to get to the hospital that the outside signs of the abuse had healed. During this time, crazy-eyed Anna started wearing a crimson jacket wherever she went. I asked her why she was wearing it, and I also said that she looked pretty, thinking that talking nicely to her would start a friendly conversation to maybe smooth everything over. Well, Anna is not like normal people and doesn't think like normal people. Her response was that she wanted me to think of her every time I saw this color, and said that she had seen it work in a movie. Then she added, "I'm more beautiful than you will ever be." Wherever she went, she had a horde of schmoozers around her, all thinking she was some kind of famous and fancy artist. But eventually, she had to leave the school, and I thought I had peace. Except, she one day suddenly showed up, and gleefully presented me with the school's Russian exchange student. This student had been sitting at my table every day for weeks, and I hadn't paid it any mind because why would I? She was allowed to sit there. But this is when crazy-eyed Anna drops the bombshell that this exchange student was A, not a real student, and B, she had been putting her phone on the table each mealtime while having it on speaker with Anna on the other end, silently listening to my conversations. I remember when she first told me this, how I didn't believe it. I didn't believe, and a part of me still had a hard time realizing the lengths this woman was going to were real. But it was what she had said next that terrified me the most. She said, "I know about the secret messages behind your words. I know what you're up to." And I heard a voice from above that told me that it is my mission in life to keep an eye on you, to make sure that you behave. The abuse at school escalated quickly after this. I was harassed and cornered in every classroom, and chased around school, and at the same time, I got no help. It escalated into a happening one late weekend night. I was sitting in the school's texture room when a guy suddenly burst in and started running towards me screaming, "What makes you think you can sit here?" He didn't go to the school. I jumped out of a window and started running towards my dorm and managed to call 112 in the meantime, the emergency number for Sweden. and managed to scream out that I needed help and where I was. I ran towards my dorm, but another guy was waiting for me there. So I ran towards the head building, but a third guy was waiting there. They cornered me, and I remembered how scared I was. I thought I was going to die. But then, a light of hope. Blue and red lights from the road. I was saved. I remember how happy I was to see that police officer. Everything would finally be over. And then, he walked up to the girl who orchestrated all of it, Malin, and he greeted her like a friend. And I knew at that moment that he wouldn't save me. I screamed for help and he ignored me. She told me that there was no issue here. He said he was looking forward to seeing her around town. And then he left. He left me. He just drove away. The last thing I remember is the backlights of that police car driving away. I wake up the next morning, laying on the ground with a huge bump on the side of my head. I don't know what happened. Madeline claims they never touched me and I just passed out when one of the guys had grabbed me. But I know better. I know the pain I felt and the huge bump on the side of my head. I called 112 and I called for an ambulance. At this time, because of the abuse, I had memory loss and couldn't quite tell the lady what the issue was. But I made a mistake. I told her that I had called 112 the day after, and that a police officer had just left me. And she got mad, really, really mad. She told me that I was slandering her coworker and to only call if I actually needed help. And then she hung up on me. I was alone again, with no one, not a single person on my side. I tried to make a police report against Anna and Malin, but the officer had heard about me and deleted my report. It was during this time that I had had enough and I thought I just couldn't take it anymore. And I was forcibly put into a mental health ward. And the stalking still didn't stop. Crazy-eyed Anna had a friend of hers be committed so she could come into the ward as a visitor in order to harass me. When I tried to go to art school again, she had people that she had threatened join the same program so they could keep an eye on me. At home, she would have another guy she had threatened to park outside my house a few times a week in order to scare me. During this, she would also have things stolen from me. Things like shoes, gloves, and the like, and according to the people doing the stealing, this was because she had watched a movie where someone steals items and then puts them back to make someone go insane from the harassment. Crazy-eyed Anna would call me a few times a year, lying about being a data collector to get private information out of me. It's something that took a few years to even catch on to. Because she lived in a big city far away at the time, she constantly forced others to do the stalking for her. Most of them had at one point given drugs to and then would get them to do what she wanted by threatening to report them to the police if they wouldn't. Others she just bribed with money or charmed. I have gone for hour-long bus rides where someone admits to being there for her sake. Most people are afraid of her because she won't leave them alone and she will do to them what she does to me if they don't say yes to her. One girl was roped into standing all dressed in red outside my supermarket. Another girl was also roped into sitting with her car outside my house for hours a few days a week, all because of the fear of this woman. I learned from a cousin of hers that she affords all of this because she won an art prize for $500,000 at one point. It's why she thinks she's famous. I also learned that most of her biological family has cut contact with her because she has been doing this since she was a teenager. And yet, even with that information, no one would listen. When I tell people what she had done to me, people call me the crazy one. I have no history of delusions or of making up tall tales, yet it was so much easier for people to just think that I'm crazy. I had been forcefully medicated at some points with psychosis medication that baffled doctors lamented over not working. Not even my family believes me, something that has forever barred how much I trust I can put into the relationship between us. I asked her once why she was doing all of this and she said, "To punish you." I asked her for how long I would need to be punished and she answered, "For as long as I want." At one point, I even considered killing her, I am the kind of person who catches flies alive in a cup and lets them out the window. I have never harmed another human being. I have never been violent. Yet at one point, I felt so desperate for freedom that I would have taken prison rather than being haunted by crazy-eyed Anna anymore. I was more afraid of her than of prison. And then it stopped. It just stopped. Still a year later, I don't know why it stopped. Nothing in her history tells me that she would stop willingly. So I'm convinced that either she has run out of people to threaten into doing her bidding, or something has happened to her. It's possible that one of those people finally reported her and actually got taken seriously. I don't know. Even so, I can't feel relief. Not yet. I'm still afraid it will start again, and I have given up all hope of being taken seriously by the police. This is something that happened to me 5 or so years ago. I was fresh out of university with my degree in international development. I wanted to help undeserved communities develop meaningful projects and see more of the world. I was young. I was naive, eager to get started. I took one of the first jobs that offered me a position. It wasn't something I necessarily wanted to do, but it was adjacent to my interests and, more importantly, took me to a place that I had never been before. I loved everything when I arrived. It was beautiful, sunny, and green. My new coworkers, all local staff, were amazing and so kind. My boss invited me to play soccer on Sundays with his family. My fellow project coordinator would go out dancing with me on the weekends. My roommate, a fellow expat working in development as well, was a fun and spunky woman that I adored. I felt so blessed. And then one day it all changed. I was walking downtown with a friend. There is a vegetable and fruit market that had great fresh produce directly from the farmers growing it. It was about a 20-minute bus ride from my apartment, so not close but not incredibly far either. My friend and I loaded up and began walking over to a quiet corner to call a cab to help us haul our goods back. And then I heard it. Hey, miss," using my exact address. It took me a second to realize what he was shouting. I turned around to see a man hanging out of his car, slowly crawling along the road with us. My friend recognized my address too. She turned to me and asked, "Do you know him?" I had never seen him before. He kept shouting, "Yeah, you're living in the back house on the second floor, right?" That made it even worse. I lived on a big suburban lot with 2 houses, one in the front, where my landlady and her family lived, and the second in the back. The second house was split into 2 apartments. The bottom floor housed 2 students, while I lived on the second floor with my roommate. You couldn't see the second house from the road, much less the stairway that led to the second floor. My heart was pounding. I wanted to shout back at the guy, but I was scared. I was a 22-year-old woman living in a foreign country, and I didn't want to draw attention. I didn't know how people would react. I didn't know how he would react. And so we walked. My friend tried to comfort me, saying that maybe he knew my landlady's family. I was probably the only redhead in the whole country. He could be a neighbor I hadn't met. The encounter didn't leave me, it stayed in my mind. A week or so passed, and I stopped glancing behind my back whenever a car drove by. I started to feel secure. And then he showed up again. I was walking home from work, and it was getting dark. My office was a 15 to 20 minute stroll from my apartment, perfect as a quick way to stretch my legs. I was halfway home when I felt someone watching me, and then the slow crawl of a car siding up beside me. I knew it was him without looking. "Hey, miss," he said, leaning out his window, one hand on the wheel. "Why so shy?" I ignored him and kept walking. There was no one around, and it was getting dark. "Oh, come on, let me give you a ride. I know where you live." Not reassuring, I started to feel my chest tighten. I wanted to call someone, but I didn't know what he would do if I reached for my phone. I was practically jogging now, but he had just sped up to match my pace. "Listen, lady," and now he was angry, his voice harder. You don't just ignore a man like that. I wondered what I would do if he stopped the car. He looked fit and young. He could probably catch me. He could hurt me. And so I did, something that, in retrospect, seemed absolutely bizarre. I yelled at him, wildly, rapidly. I did it in my first language, not what they spoke in this country. Not a language he would have ever heard, probably. I screamed curse words and threats, anything that I could think of. I'll never forget the confused fury on his face, but he did slow down, letting me run ahead. I could see a woman at a bus stop at the intersection ahead. If I got to her, maybe she would help. Maybe he would get scared off. By the time I got to the woman, he was gone. I kept walking home, looking behind me with every step. I told my roommate about what had happened, and she told me not to bother reporting it to the police, since they were corrupt and wouldn't do anything. When I told my boss, he told me the same. He said that he had a baseball bat and he would come whenever I called. Well, I saw the man again 2 weeks later. He was sitting in his car, parked in front of the gates to my apartment. I had been about to take out the trash, but retreated before he could see me. I told my landlady, and when she went over to confront him, he drove off. This continued for weeks, and not every day, but once or twice a week. He would always be there waiting. I now took cabs to and from work. I never traveled alone. I barely slept, waiting for him to break in and kill me. In my last week abroad, he almost did. I went out drinking with a group of my friends, 4 of us in total. We were celebrating the end of my contract, and I was happy to go home in a few days. I couldn't wait to see my family. I couldn't wait to put an ocean between me and the man. We had beers at a local bar about a 5 to 10 minute walk max from my apartment. When it was starting to get late around 1, we tried to get a cab, but it was impossible. The roads were jammed and people were everywhere outside. Cabs couldn't even get to us. So we thought, even though others warned us not to, let's walk home. It would be faster than calling a cab. We'll be fine. There's 4 of us, and no one will hassle us. And we got halfway there when we had to cross a main road. There were no streetlights, and not that kind of place. And the road was absolutely empty, and not a single car in sight. We crossed the road. A few more minutes, but then we were backlit with the bright headlights of a car coming up. We glanced back. A cop car, 2 men in the front. And I knew, even though I couldn't see from the bright lights in my eyes, that he was driving. He was a cop. The car slowed as I knew it would. He rolled down the window to a drawl. "Hey there, miss. A nice night, yeah?" My friends immediately knew who it was, and I could see how nervous they were. We were alone on a dark, empty street in the middle of the night. They were cops, though. They were armed. No one would intervene promptly. It's too dangerous. "You girls need a ride," he leered. His friend, who I could see now, was grinning hugely. My last few days, I thought, and this is how it ends. We sped up our pace. I don't know what our plan was other than to get away. And then I heard one of the doors of the Jeep open as the passenger jumped out. I don't think I've ever been so scared in my life, although I didn't dare turn back to see. We were at the turn to my street now, 2 minutes more to get to safety. The car was right behind us. Whoever had gotten out of the car was right behind us. 2 of my friends were ahead now, while another clutched my hand and dragged me along. And then out of nowhere, another car appeared. They were coming from the opposite direction, illuminating us all. When they slowed to see what was going on, I had never been so grateful. It was an older couple and they looked concerned. I think they knew something very bad was about to happen. I heard and not saw the car door swing open. I almost got hit as they sped past us in a hurry. The other car stayed, watching. They offered to escort us back home, driving alongside just in case. But I knew that he wouldn't come back, not tonight. I still took a cab with my friends to their place for the night, and we took my roommate with us, just in case. Nothing happened after that. My last 2 days were uneventful, although I couldn't shake the feeling that he might show up at any given moment. Driving to the airport all packed up and ready to go home, my cab got pulled over by a cop. My stomach dropped and I couldn't breathe. It wasn't him, although it could have been. It wasn't until I got on the plane, until I finally landed in my home country, that I finally felt that terror leave me. I still get nervous when cars drive up behind me, when men roll down their windows to shout at me. It's never him, but still, you never know.